What's up, Georgia Bulldogs fans? My name is Scott Duvall, and you are listening to and watching episode 231 of the Waitin Since Last Saturday podcast. I'm joined, as usual, by my two co-hosts, Will Leach and Tony Waller. And on today's episode, let me see if I can remember. I have my notes. We talk about Tiger King. Yes, Will and Tony give their review on that. There's no sports, so you might as well talk about that. Virtual G-Day is happening on Saturday, where on the SEC Network, they're playing Georgia Notre Dame 2019, so last year's game. And then also on the show, Will brings up the college football playoff meeting that they had with Vice President Pence, and how basically what they came up with is if there's no students in the school, there's going to be no college sports or no college football. So that'll be something interesting to watch and monitor, and we discuss that on the show. And then finally, Will shares kind of a unique, commentary, if you will, on Jake Fromm's legacy, which he shares at the end of the show. Oh, yeah, don't forget, we do have Georgia football Jeopardy. Let's see how the guys do this time around on Jeopardy. And yeah, that's it. We're going to go ahead and get started with the episode. Thanks for tuning us in. Hope you're staying safe, and yeah, enjoy the episode. So yeah, we're all recording. It's your house looks nice. I tell you what, guys, I don't think that this is too much of an overstatement. If we're gonna be stuck at home for 33 days straight, I think I can count on two fingers of days we've had bad weather. So we have been very blessed with awesome spring weather.
I'm aware of it occasionally, but I've started having class more outside lately. I'm doing this podcast outside. We did the YouTube thing outside. Trying to do more things outside as a general rule, because I cannot get my children to understand this. I cannot understand why. Like, it's going to be 145 degrees in like a month and a half, and they will not want to go outside then. So they will appreciate a time like now. But they won't. They keep not wanting to go outside.
This has been one of the busiest work weeks I've had in some time. This has been my home for 8 to 10 hours a day. Although I will probably do some of my stuff outside tomorrow, out on the back porch, just because it's some of the stuff is more spread out, and I don't have to have the computer plugged in the entire time.
This isn't going to be posted until after tomorrow, so. Can you tell us?
Here's your scoop.
Okay.
Kyle Trask, even though we're not going to play football this year, is your Heisman winner.
All right. Well, that's very exciting. I assumed I was going to give it to him anyway.
Yeah. Well, everyone else has. So.
Well, why don't y'all give me your thoughts? Oh, before we get on that, I did go to the Georgia Dawgs website today for some pre-show material, some research, and they had a big banner up saying on this day. Something happened. So on April 16th, we're recording on April 16th. April 16th, 1993. Tony, you have a guess of something really important for the school and athletics as a whole happened? It has to do with the sport.
With a sport.
A particular sport. Something great happened.
Is this a golf thing?
No, Will.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so it's an actual sport. Got it.
My first guess would have been Jim Donnan was hired, but that's not right.
No.
So.
No, the Gym Dogs won the national championship.
Oh, was that the fifth in a row?
I don't remember, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's good.
Yeah.
So that's the trivia to start the podcast, but we have a big Jeopardy round at the end of this podcast that both of y'all can look forward to, and so can the listeners.
Oh, good.
So Tony, you I don't know what you got planned for us, Scott, but I have to say, Tony, you hit on something that I think really probably has to lead any sort of conversation that a Georgia football podcast is going to have, which is, to me, the rather big scoop that Stu Mandel and the other guy had from The Athletic, which is from the conversation with Vice President Pence that the commissioners and the school presidents had. Essentially, the news item that came out of that, because most of these things, I will say, like when all the commissioners met with Trump, there was not a lot of news that came out of that, but there was news that came out of the Pence thing, which is they have all confirmed that there will not be college football until students are back. There will be no college football played without students physically on campus. That does not mean that did not seem to leave a lot of leeway to virtual classes or anything along those regard. That was the big news I thought that came out of that. And I have to say, again, whenever we talk about any sport, we do not know. We do not know what's going to happen. I be hesitant, be suspicious of anyone that has any certainty about anything at all at this point. But one thing that seems to be clear is if there are not students on campus, there will not be college football.
Yeah, I thought it was both a smart position from the legality of everything that's coming down the pike on student athletes. A surprisingly smart decision on the part of the college presidents,
and also, early too,
right? Yeah. And also a pragmatic one, right? Is that I think they recognize from a public relations standpoint the problems with putting in particular football players in some sort of jeopardy, however you want to frame that, as you look at how they are going to come back on campus, how you're going to keep them safe, how you can keep them healthy, but then you're also not letting the general population of your college students back. It's just on top of being a savvy legal maneuver on their part of clinging to whatever vestiges of the student part of student athlete you can. It's a pretty savvy move on their part in thinking about think about the practicalities and how it will look from a public relations standpoint. I thought it was, frankly, it was probably the most reasonable take I've heard in 3 weeks about college football season. And part of that is you have a lot of writers who would be writing about things like recruiting and recruiting visits and spring practices and the number of beer cans thrown out of a quarterback's apartment in Knoxville and all the things that go with that. Now there's an entire group of college football writers who are all very good and very talented, having to write about something. And there's been a lot of noise and nonsense, but this was it was reasoned and reasonable, and considering the people in that room, I'll take that.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Andy Staples was the other guy. But
yeah, Staples. Yeah.
Staples' name fell out of my head. Sorry about that. But yeah, I have to say, it did feel. Listen, this is kind of my beat now of what's happening with which sports and which things are what people are trying to figure out. And I have to say, and I was on my friend Bernie Miklas's radio show this morning talking about this. I have to say, there's a certain reflexive. This is a very online thing. A certain reflexive, whenever like any sports league tosses out any idea of maybe getting some sort of sports to happen this year, everyone's like, "You guys are stupid. This is dumb. Why would you even think about stuff like this?" And I feel like people can chew gum and walk at the same time. I think it is reasonable for people to be able to float ideas and try out new things. The idea that you're going to have a typical baseball season or a typical NFL season or a typical NBA season, obviously it's not going to be that. But the idea that you should not explore something for people, to me, is not only dumb, but even kind of irresponsible, because I think people actually want it. And I think, I know online discourse leads, this will come as a shock to you guys, but online discourse leads to histrionic, demonstrative overreactions in performative fashion to show that you are more serious than everybody else is. But I do think that I don't know if baseball's gonna work. I don't know if NFL's gonna. I don't know if some of these things are gonna try and are gonna work. But I'm glad that they are trying them. But I will say, with this college football thing, the thing I loved about that meeting was exactly what you're talking about, Tony. The idea of, listen, everybody wants college football to happen. Everyone wants to figure this out. But no students, no games. That is basic and simple and understandable. And so now we got a goalpost, right? We got a goalpost. That is your thing. Can you get students back to campus? If you can, there will be football. And if you can't, there will not be football. There's a goal. Let's figure it out. I kind of appreciated the clarity of that conversation and frankly, the bowing to reality at an early stage that I did appreciate.
Well, the thing that it makes me think about is the realism or the realistic chance that all schools on Georgia's 2020 schedule are going to be in session at the same time, or all going to start at the same time, or really look at the SEC schedule. Some schools might be back in, some might not. So that, to me, if I'm kind of thinking ahead, that would either mean a commuted schedule or shifting around some dates if they're trying to create a whole 12-game schedule, which is both terrifying because that means that college football might not happen and we might still be in this quarantine, and then also intriguing to where if, say, East Tennessee State fell off or, Virginia even, who are you going to either match it with, or are you just going to go with 9, 10, 8 games, whatever's left?
Well, I think part of what you hit on there is, there's a state immediately to our west that we played the third game of the season in their flagship institution that still has not implemented social distancing, still hasn't implemented some other measures. They have. They said you should. They haven't implemented them.
They've suggested it, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a suggestion. So you do bring up a good point. Is that when they say we can't conceive of a football season until the students are back on campus and taking classes, what does that mean? There is entirely a world where places where things happened early and people acted quickly. Washington, New York, maybe California, maybe Michigan,
maybe Athens, as opposed to surrounding areas of Athens.
Amen.
Well, sure, but there could be places where things are back to whatever the normal will be until there's a vaccine or antibody test or however. I'm not a scientist, I don't know, but until things are back to normal, and still places where they aren't normal. Also the interesting question is like, how do you handle if we get back in the middle of the season and there's a rebound or whatever? I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a lawyer anymore, but these are things that, like, I have maintained from the day the NBA, the NCAA, Major League Baseball, all those places shut down, places that don't like to lose money, gave up a lot of money. That's when I started taking it seriously. And that's on me, but that's also kind of what you have to pay attention to in our America. That also will guide when we open back up. But if we end up in a situation where there's a rebound, at what point do you say it's not worth keeping things open again? And they have to look forward at that and model that before they decide that they're going to put people back in situations where there could be a reinfection spike.
I find that kind of interesting, Scott, something you touched on and something that I think relates to this as opposed to kind of what's going on nationally. The idea, like baseball, Rob Manfred could say, we're not coming back. The NFL, Roger Goodell can say, we're not coming back, or we are coming back. Like there's somebody in charge, and this was touched on in the Staples and Mandel story, the idea that the NCAA doesn't really have some like one person in charge that can install all this, which interestingly enough kind of reflects the national situation in the idea that, like, Scott, you were kind of touched on the idea, like, both, like you said, Alabama is way behind on this stuff and could actually get hit at a later date, and I think parts of Georgia could. But whereas, Virginia, for example, seems to be in a better situation. The idea that like certain schools will be open and having students and certain schools won't is a fascinating question. It could be a chance for Hugh Freeze to finally win the national championship, by the way, because Liberty could be the only school that's open. So that's kind of an interesting thought. But more to that,
provided they have any students that aren't sick.
Exactly. Provided there's anybody actually upright to go. But for me, like that's what's kind of interesting about this is I think college football is a unique confluence of circumstances, in that there's no one person in charge. It is a national sport, but it is also one where the power centers are often in places where there's more resistance to and more eagerness to get back to where we were before. And I say that not just in the South. I say that in Ohio, for example. I think that you're, and if it comes down to, you know what, Liberty's ready to play some football. Georgia's ready to play some football, but Alabama isn't. Do you like it? Is there one person in charge when you combine that with the fact that they need this money so badly? Like we've already seen Cincinnati drop wrestling. Like this is not, if there's no baseball for a year, and hopefully there will be baseball for a year, it will be tough, but baseball will survive. If there's no NFL for a year, it will be hard, but NFL will still survive. I'm not sure some of these college athletic programs will be able to survive without a year of television money, which therefore makes them more likely to push it. And to me, that's what's really interesting about this is college football has so many different people in charge of their own little fiefdoms, and they all have different risk management things they're able to handle. There's an argument to be made that this could, as much clarity as we got from that, there's still Liberty's got students on campus, Georgia's got students on campus, but Alabama doesn't. What happens then? It's a fascinating situation.
Yeah, and 75 to 90% of those athletic budgets are made up of ticket sales, TV revenue, and donations. Now, for most SEC, ACC schools, probably Big 10, Big 12, they've already got our donations. That's just a small portion of what Georgia, say for University of Georgia would make, because they're going to net $5 million a home game, and then even more for Georgia, Florida. So it is interesting, and I'm kind of repeating what we've been saying is kind of fascinating, because what you could have, I was thinking more regional, but Will, you brought up a good point. Like Washington seems to be handling it better than some states. Even California, from what I read, is handling it a little bit better. What if, and I'm playing the what if game just because we're on a podcast about college football and might as well. What if, say, Georgia had a 6 or 7 game schedule? Maybe they played a regional schedule where they're literally just making it up a couple weeks before, like saying, hey, Mr. Athletic Director at North Carolina, y'all good? Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Or what if Georgia flies out to Washington State to play the Huskies? I don't know. Or maybe they play Georgia Southern just on a whim. But it is interesting because nobody knows. I mean, Will, you could write a whole article about the what ifs of a 6 or 7 game season, and you wouldn't be entirely wrong because it's going to be fluid. It's going to be changing. So, the revenue is going to push it if the students are back. And I agree with both of y'all. I really enjoyed hearing and reading about here's how we're going to do it, because it really does give you a way to kind of take a breath. And like you said, there's a line in the sand. And that's what we as college football fans are looking forward to and crossing our fingers for, hoping that we can all get through this as a collective and be able to enjoy some tailgating or even some games.
Yeah, there's two things that I think comes out of this. I think the longer this goes, the more likely it is there's some sort of weird hybrid playoff. We saw that with baseball a couple of times. We've seen that with football before. I think the senator proposed this idea that, let's say, season doesn't start to October. There's still time to do a truncated conference schedule, and also to throw a bone to some of the bowls to highlight. You maybe do a conference championship game in. I don't want to name a New Year's Six bowl, but you throw a conference championship game in the Alamo Bowl, the Big Ten championship in the Alamo Bowl or something, but then you have 8 teams. I mean, you already have that ready made. You have 6 bowl games. They're part of the New Year's Six, and 4 of them are semifinals, 4 of them are quarters, 2 of them are semis, then you have a championship game. And still, especially how late the championship game is this year. That does allow some flexibility. The other thing, Scott, you hit on this pretty early. There's also a possibility of a significant seismic shift in alignment. And I think it's premature to talk about that, but this does definitely present an opportunity for the haves to do something where the have-nots can't. And economic disruption is the same as TV, or it's exactly the same as renegotiating TV contracts. I tell you what, the people who, if I'm a Pac-12 school with their television contracts and they're already struggling, I would really be worried if I'm a Pac-12 school that is not UCLA, USC, and Oregon, maybe the Arizona schools, just because they have a large natural base that they can draw on, and plus they're closer to the Texas schools. Um, and then we could be looking at 2008, 9, 10 again, where there is like this weird place where places that it would have been hard for us to conceive of then ended up in the Mountain West, still may end up in the Mountain West. And I'm not, Missouri, they latched onto the right people at the right time, but man, it's why if you're what's the natural connection between Kansas and the University of Texas or whatever? I mean, those questions will be asked over the next few months, especially if football season is truncated or abrogated. So, which I guess brings us to the next thing, which is, guys, G-Day was supposed to be Saturday.
Yes.
It still is, Tony.
Yes.
I'm very happy the SEC network, which we would not be able to see the G-Day game on TV if this hadn't happened, but we're getting to see the Notre Dame game, the one here in Athens. I assume it rained. I don't remember, and I do remember it didn't rain, but they're going to kick it off at 2:00. I think we're going to. I think we here at the house are going to do some sort of tailgatey thing. Charlie, my son, asked if we're going to put the tent up, and I was like, we just might do that. Go get some biscuits or something. But I'm jonesing to sit outside and drink as opposed to sit inside and drink. And I guess I've been sitting outside and drinking, but under a tent. And I think there is a level of the Notre Dame game is kind of the game we need if we're not going to be able to play an actual scrimmage. I have seen a couple of people have passed around. I think Bassin Dog has passed around kind of a Zoom tailgate thing at 1:00 if you're so inclined to join that. But one of the things that does occur to me, and I'm not talking about G-Day proper. We will talk about some G-Day memories in a second. About G-Day proper is that the only thing that bums me about this is not being able to see, and not just be able to see, but actually Jamie Newman getting to work with the receivers and Todd Monken on actual football stuff. I mean, yeah, they're talking. I'm sure he's looked at plenty of playbooks, plenty of plays, but to actually pick up a football and go out and throw a football, to be in the locker room building that rapport. Because when you sit down and look at what Jamie Newman did at Wake Forest, he was more than just a running quarterback, but what they asked him to do is totally different from what Georgia's going to ask him to do. I mean, he was option. I mean, he was basically Vince Young minus any receivers and running backs, and he was asked to carry that team and put him in a situation where you're going to have an effective running game because of the running backs, and you're going to have, I mean, if nothing else, you're going to have George Pickens back, at least until he tries to body slam a tech player, which I'm here for, into a stanchion. And it's hard. He just the level of talent around him is going to be so different. It's going to be so much fun to see what he does. The problem is, if we didn't have Alabama September 19th, I would not be at all worried. But having Alabama September 19th changes the math a lot. And having all these practices, and missing all these practices, more importantly, man, there are very few programs other than places that have changed head coaches that probably have had their ceiling lowered as much as Georgia.
I think that's true, and to be fair, everyone is dealing with this in their own way. It's funny I like when you brought up the Notre Dame game because it reminded me of how good, I mentioned this when I talked to Scott last week, how much I love the podcast that's been played both Notre Dame games on audio, but they also had Kirby Smart on this week, and First off, I will say, you guys know I've been somewhat. I've had my moments of not so much being critical of the program, but being critical of perhaps the outward-reaching, the public-facing part of Kirby Smart. I have to say, I feel like he has actually handled this very smartly and maturely. Football coaches are not known for their perspective and their ability to understand the world outside of football. And
Will, let me interject. They are not good with downtime.
No kidding. They're not good with only being stuck in the house and not good with
time. Oh my God, my family.
I know, right? And I actually thought his attitude was smart about this and more athlete focused. You had asked him about recruiting, and he talked about, he's like, listen, the main thing we want to make sure from anyone we're recruiting is that like their home situation is okay right now, because it is obviously this is scary for a lot of people, and a lot of people that a lot of young kids are maybe in situations that are not conducive to making it through to being able to handle something like this. I thought his attitude was very good. He also correctly responded once again. Note to reporters, don't ask people about Tiger King. It's a stupid show, and it's not good. And I am totally 100%. It's a terrible documentary. There's like huge logic gaps. The guy that made it is a jerk. There's a story that posts about him, about how he's a restaurateur who's fired all of his people and like is giving them no benefits. Doesn't matter. Tiger King is not good. And they asked Kirby Smart about it. He said, yeah, I like something with him a little bit more substantive. That I've been watching Ozark, and I was like, yep, that's my coach. That's my coach right there. And so I will say I was impressed by the way that the perspective he had, which is actually, I think, a good way to lead into another big thing that happened with the football team, which is Jeremy Klosky, the video coordinator. There had been reports about, and of course he's left anonymous, there was reports that a member of the football program had tested positive. And not only did he test positive with COVID, he was actually quite ill. Jeremy Klosky is a video coordinator. I don't know. I will confess, I was not familiar with him before, but like he was seriously ill. He was on a ventilator. He was released from the hospital today. Kirby Smart was there. Greg McGarity was there. Ron Corson was there. It's a great story in the Athens Banner Herald, which I subscribe to, and I encourage everyone to do. And it was really great. And I have to say, that to me felt like the right attitude. We're all worried about recruiting. We're all worried about practice. We're all worried, and I get all of those things. They matter, but like the listen to Kirby Smart talk, he did not sound like he was bouncing off the walls, furious that his well-paid, meticulous plans about college football were getting upset right now. The way that I suspect most college football, like Dabo. You saw Dabo interviewed. He's being a lunatic about all this. He's like, why aren't we playing? This is crazy. Like, it's like the attitude that Kirby Smart had, to me, was so much better than what you've seen from Dabo and some of the other coaches. And understand that obviously college football is very important to him. He's a very competitive guy, but the attitude that he had about it, I have to say, as someone that is somewhat skeptical of stuff sometimes, I thought it was the right attitude and going at, and it made me kind of proud that he was the coach of a program as opposed to maybe some other people.
Yeah, I mean, it is impressive how his. What was it? A couple of weeks ago, last week, he was doing an interview, and one of the boys ran in and was like, "Dad, there's a snake in the driveway," and he was like, "Okay, buddy, I'm sorry, I just can't. I can't. I'm in the middle of something here." And it was just very human, right? Yeah. And I'm glad you said that about Lion King, Tiger King. Lion King's a different thing. Yeah. Tiger King, because I did watch Tiger King because it's not because I hate myself, but it's just like it's one of those. I don't know, moments. And I actually told a group of students a little bit ago, they were asking me like, so what about Tiger King? And I was like, yeah, I've watched it. It's like eating store brand frosting. You're putting something in your mouth and it's like sweet for a second, but then your mouth is coated. You feel really bad about your decisions. Yeah. It's just like,
that's a great analogy.
It just made no, it was just like, ugh. It's like, hey, we have all this footage. Let's put it out on TV. It's like outtakes from Real World Tulsa. It's just bad.
And it's frustrating too because, there's obviously a great story in there somewhere. And there's obviously
and the guy
interesting
just
details.
missed it.
Yeah, and like just there's this sneering attitude that I think that it's funny. The film was produced by Chris Smith, who's one of my favorite documentary filmmakers. He made one of the good of the two Firefest documentaries that came out at the end of last year. He made the good one, and he made American Movie, which is a great movie that came out a while ago. Came out 10 years ago. He's just a really good filmmaker, and I really wanted his hand on this because it really felt very, oh, look at this idiot. Here's another. And listen, they're idiots. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like that was the extent. Yeah.
It was just super voyeuristic and super like, hey, look at these rubes.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, but the overarching thing is, I'm glad that the video coordinator is better. And Jim McCloskey's better, and I thought it was very cool that during this time, they were there. Like he got released from the hospital, and McGarity was there, and Kirby Smart was there, and I think it ties into the overarching attitude that I think that Kirby Smart has displayed in a way that is impressive for a football coach, to say the least, and definitely was. Considering how many fans I'm hearing being like, when are we getting sports back? This is no big deal. Why can't I just have my college football? To see the guy that, runs the Georgia football program having a good perspective on this struck me as a good sign.
So for virtual G-Day, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be broadcast, like y'all said, on SEC Network. There is also going to be a Georgia radio broadcast with Chuck, Scott, and Eric on Facebook Live, so you can tune into that. And Kirby is going to be live tweeting the game, which I think is awesome. I think it's going to be an interesting thing to hear what he was thinking. The at mentions he's going to get when it comes down to kicking that field goal at the end versus going for it could be interesting right there. Tony might jump into the mentions. Maybe he wouldn't. But that'll be cool. I give them a lot of credit for just making an effort, trying something. It might go over like a lead balloon. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to tune in. I'm interested to see the Facebook Live. They even said Kirby Smart might even pop in on the Facebook Live, which I think is awesome as well. So right now, I mean, like anybody really that's taking time to either watch this on YouTube or listen to it on their podcast player, we're just trying to figure out what sports is going to look like, and we miss it, and we're coping with it pretty decently. I mean, it's been 33 days, and I'm coping with it, but it's just fun to just kind of figure out what's going to happen in the future, which is what we've talked about, and then with the virtual G-Day, to be on Twitter and watch Kirby talk about that game, and it was a nail-biter, and how they're up by like 2 touchdowns, but not really, and then that last play, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I tell you how bad it's gotten as far as like jonesing for sports. One day, on the end of last week, I'm down here working, and I listen upstairs, and I hear Georgia game on, and the kids are watching Georgia Texas A&M. I'll know I'll know it's bad when they're watching Georgia Kentucky, but which led to an entire debate about that game, and they were just like into it, even though I think Maggie went to that game with us. They were just like really into that game, and they're like, "Isn't that the game it rained all day?" And it's like, "Well, that's like 7 games last year."
Yes.
But I said that's the game where about halftime the sun came out, and you could hear the fans cheer, and sure enough, we got to halftime, and I thought I remember people cheering louder than they were. I guess in the stadium was louder, but there was an audible cheer, and then of course there was a conversation between Gary, and Gary was like, "Oh, look at that, the sun's out," in Gary's way. I'd also forgotten that was the game after the Auburn game where the photographer had been run over, I'd forgotten how heartfelt and poignant his apology, his mea culpa was. It just was really genuine, and like a lot of people don't like Gary, and there are times I don't, but I think he is as smart a color geyser is out there. But that was a really human moment on his part to the way he talked about the things he said and how he said it and just owned it. I don't know. I kind of went down a rabbit hole after talking about Texas A&M, which is what happens when you go to Texas A&M. I didn't freeze. I just stopped for a second.
No, you're good. No, I figure it was time, I figure it was ready for a Scott transition.
Well, I was going to ask you, Tony, what are your thoughts? Are you going to be following Kirby's tweets tomorrow or on Saturday during the game?
Yeah, I probably will. I mean, like I said, I think we will set up one of the tents out in the front yard and put a table up and just like hang out there. And then we'll go to the back porch and watch TV. But I'll definitely follow Kirby just because look, it's part of the fun of G Day for me is the chance, not quite halfway between, but somewhat halfway between, not just to practice tailgate, but to kind of congregate among the Georgia faithful. And obviously, we're not going to be able to do that on campus, and I'm not going to be able to see y'all or in for that matter anybody else. And I'm looking for sufficient methadone to get me through whatever it is that we're going to have. And if this is what they're going to offer, I'm going to give it a shot. Especially if it's free at the clinic.
Well, do y'all want to get into some Georgia Jeopardy?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. And
we were both very bad at this on the YouTube live, Tony.
Well, I mean, to be fair, he asked me, it's like, so what is Frank Ross's middle name?
No,
Yeah,
I did not.
I had much easier questions and still punked them. So yeah, I'm with you.
And yeah, before I get into this, we as a collective podcast, we are going to be re-releasing my 2018 G-Day video where I interviewed Will and Tony. So that's going to be re-released on Saturday on our WSLS podcast YouTube channel. So y'all go subscribe and look for that. Shameless plug.
Very exciting.
All right, let's get into the Georgia football Jeopardy.
This
All right.
is Jeopardy.
There we go. All right, so this is the $200 Jeopardy question. Are you ready? And just ring in with your name.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. Can you see this? I'll read it for you. A lightly recruited receiver out of Florida. I'll finish. Okay, Will. A lightly recruited receiver out of Florida, this former Bulldog holds the record for most punt return touchdowns in her career at 5. Will?
Oh, wait. Now I regret buzzing in. Who is Nicole Hardeman?
That is incorrect.
Ron Mexico. No, it's I think it's. I mean, I don't think Isaiah McKenzie was lightly recruited, but that's who I'm going with.
That's correct. The correct answer is Isaiah McKenzie, and I put lightly recruited because he was not a 5-star.
Oh, well, that doesn't mean you're not recruited.
I love that is a sign of Georgia football that if you're not 5-star.
Yeah. I have to say that would not be how that question would be phrased on official Jeopardy. Nyuk, nyuk, nyuk.
All right, good job, Tony. That's correct. So here's your $400 Jeopardy question. In 2015, here I'm going to reduce that a little. In 2015, a little-known podcast began. They called it WSLS Podcast. That same year, the Georgia Bulldogs football team won 10 games and lost 3 to these opponents.
Tony. Oh, sorry. No, my name. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna give it a shot because Tony hasn't said anything yet, and he can get the ones I missed. Florida. Oh, sorry. What are Florida?
Yes.
What are Florida, Auburn, and Tennessee?
2 out of 3.
Okay.
Tony, do you have a guess?
Oh, I know which one I missed. Damn.
Oh, Alabama. Damn.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, we lost to Alabama that year. I was sitting there thinking, I was like, hold up. Didn't we lose to Alabama? Yeah.
We lost to Alabama.
Oh, yeah, that was
and then
by the way, I have a bone to pick with somebody. Somebody was like, Grayson Lambert lost to Florida. No, friends. No, that was Potomac.
Come on.
Sorry.
They lost remember they lost to Tennessee on my 40th birthday.
That's right. That was a terrible loss, by the way.
That was bad. That was Chubb. Chubb got hurt. That was bad all around.
A whole thing.
All right. That's so. What's the standard? Tony, you got that right?
I got 2 out of 3.
Will got 2.
I got whatever 2/3 of 400 is.
All right, so y'all are even now. We'll just call it even,
Yeah,
right?
let's go with
okay.
that. Let's
All
go
right,
with
here's
that.
I'm fine
the
with that.
$600 Georgia Jeopardy question is, or statement, or answer is, Brian Schottenheimer served as the Georgia Bulldogs offensive coordinator for 1 season in 2015. He resurfaced in 2016 as a quarterback coach for this AFC team.
Anthony.
Go ahead, Tony.
Who are the Seattle Seahawks?
That is incorrect, Tony.
Oh, crap. I remember now.
No, that's also in the NFC. I feel obliged to point out.
Yes, I'm sorry. He did say AFC.
I think I know this.
AFC, but...
All right, Will, what do you got?
This is a team. Who are the Baltimore Ravens?
No, that's incorrect. If you had said Baltimore Colts, I would have given you half credit just on the
Indianapolis
name.
Colts, yeah.
But he was there.
I knew it was a disaster.
Yeah, he was 2016 to 2017. He was coaching Andrew Luck.
Yeah. Ran him out of football, apparently.
I guess so. All right, here is the $800 Georgia Jeopardy question or answer. You get the idea. UGA and South Carolina have played every year since 1992. All of those games have been played on a Saturday, except this year when a hurricane postponed it to Sunday. Tony, what do you got?
What is 2016?
That's correct. Georgia won the game 28-14, and there was no one at that game.
It was fun to watch on TV, though. I really enjoyed having a Sunday Georgia football game.
Yeah, and I was actually in Indianapolis that weekend for some strange reason, and I had to watch it on a streaming thing. And my abiding memory of that is paying attention on Twitter, and I was like, look, South Carolina's about to try an onside kick here, and Georgia's going to return it for a touchdown because, it was buffered 5 minutes or something.
All right, good job. All right, here's the $1,000 Georgia Jeopardy answer. In 2017, the Georgia Bulldogs won 66-27 over this independent Northeast school whose star receiver torched the Dogs for 15 receptions for 219 yards and 2 touchdowns. Can you name the school and the receiver?
What's the Northeast school?
I can name the school, but not the receiver. Go ahead.
I'd say I'm gonna go get half of it. William Franklin Leach III, who is Massachusetts.
That's correct.
And I don't know. Jones.
Bruno Ginelli.
Will, the reason I put this in there is because he plays for your Arizona Cardinals now.
Oh, is it Danny Isabella?
That's correct.
Yes!
Andy
Yeah,
Isabella.
Right. Danny Isabella. That's right. That's right. I should have done that.
I feel like Pierce
Right.
Hawthorne now.
He's what?
I feel like Pierce Hawthorne because I said an Italian name.
Yeah, he did some damage in that game. I mean, that was a complete blowout city, but he was spectacular.
I forgot he was awesome, and they love him in Arizona. By the way, when we're done with Jeopardy, we should probably talk about the draft very briefly because that's also that's
Will, are you in my head? Are you?
I'm always in your head. I own real estate there.
We have the final Jeopardy answer.
Okay.
It revolves around NFL draft. So I guess this is when the music would play, or they'd go to commercial break. So that's gone. So now here is your final Jeopardy answer. 4 Bulldogs from that special 2017 season were first-round draft picks in subsequent 2018 and 2019 drafts. Can you name those 4 Bulldogs that were first-round draft picks?
Tony, want to just do hot potato on this?
Yeah, let's. I was sitting here thinking that. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Tony. Start us off.
Roquan Smith.
That's correct. He was picked 8th overall in the 2018 draft.
Nick Chubb. No, Nick Chubb, second round. Sorry. Stop. Never mind. The guy that just got drafted. Jesus. Crap.
Isn't that the buzzer?
Yeah, Gurley was not on that team, so crap.
Oh.
Sorry. No, so.
Tony?
Sony Michel.
Sony Michel! Ah!
That's correct. He was drafted 31st overall. I'll give you a hint. There was another one drafted in the first round of 2018, and then there was one drafted in 2019.
Oh, go
Taylor.
ahead.
Who?
Is that guy's name? Not Taylor. Andrew. What's that guy's name?
That he's on the team now. He's going to be drafted like.
That's
this
right,
year.
right. So I'm off that. Right. I hate
You're barking with the right tree though.
Yes. Help me out, Tony.
He's thinking of Hill.
Who?
Who was the
No.
left tackle?
We're out.
Okay,
We're out.
it's Isaiah Wynn.
Isaiah Wynn,
damn it,
yeah.
That's what
drafted
we were trying to
by
do.
the Patriots on the 23rd
and-
pick, and then last year
And
was the
Lorenzo
only.
Carter.
Yeah.
Yeah, who
No,
was
he
last
was
year?
on the team. Yeah, Lorenzo Carter. I don't know. Must have gotten that wrong. DeAndre Baker
DeAndre
was
Baker,
drafted.
Oh, okay.
Lorenzo
Wasn't
Carter.
first round.
I don't know.
Let's
I might
see,
have missed him. It's falling apart at the seams, man. We better end this podcast.
So can I say one? How much more do you have for us? Are the reviews, or are we closing up?
And that's it for me. That's all I got.
Okay, so I want to talk about something that I was thinking, and maybe this is a good way to close. I was thinking while listening to both Notre Dame games and the Oklahoma game. I encourage you to listen to the Oklahoma Rose Bowl at every opportunity. It's very pleasant. The first Notre Dame game is fun to listen to. It's easy. Now we can all just admit that the Notre Dame game last year was maybe not the most exciting game in the world. The atmosphere was incredible, but you can't tell the atmosphere when you're listening. Most everyone was just really, really drunk, and it was kind of a conservative game. But listening to those games, it reminded me just how, listen, nobody, with the NFL draft coming up, it is really weird that Jake Fromm is done. Right? Like, there's something about so much of his history. To listen to that first Notre Dame game, that's his first start. That first Notre Dame game is his first start, and the way that they kind of talk about him, they're like, let's see if this kid can handle the pressure. How's this kid go? Wow, that was an impressive throw by Fromm. Look at that. This kid's got some moxie. Because, after Eason was hurt, there was a concern. Fromm's career with Georgia coincides almost exactly with the rise. The rise of all of this is all, it's obviously not entirely Jake Fromm, and last year we saw how he turned into Nick Fromm a few times. But nevertheless, these big moments in Georgia football history, all of which have revolved around Jake Fromm. How great he was in the Oklahoma game. How great he was in the national championship game. How great he was. Like, it's funny to think two of his best performances were losses that were not his fault at all. The national championship game and the SEC championship game the next year. Fromm is such a big part of this Georgia football resurgence that we have seen. And up until that Notre Dame game, we weren't sure, right? Like, the year before had been a little bit of a disappointment, and now Eason was hurt, and you didn't know what you were going to get. Georgia was not favored in that game. Like, there was all sorts of concern. They'd lost to Georgia Tech in the last game of the year. They were in a bowl game that people weren't paying attention to because we're above that sort of thing. The vibe was not, what it is now. And all of that has been Jake Fromm. And so there is something weirdly anticlimactic. I understand why Jake Fromm made the decision that he did. I think Jake Fromm does not owe me anything or you anything, or he's got to take care of himself, and no one denies that. It is still bizarre to think that Jake Fromm, this central figure of Georgia football, a guy I would argue is more important to the program than, say, Aaron Murray was. And Aaron Murray was great and obviously is an all-timer, more important than a lot of figures in Georgia football. There is still, and I mentioned this when he went in the emergency podcast when he went pro, there is something that will always feel unfinished and strange about the fact that this Jake Fromm story ends with him being drafted over Zoom and probably on the second day of the draft, because he's not going the first round, and the first round is only Thursday. Also, by the way, I never watched the NFL draft, and I am watching the shit out of the NFL draft this year. I never watched the NFL draft. I can't wait to watch the NFL draft this year. Sorry, bleep that. But more to the point, there is something very, it feels wrong somehow that Jake Fromm didn't finish it. And maybe it'll work out great because maybe there will be no senior year that he would have come out for him. Maybe it worked out perfectly for him. But it still feels weird that that sort of, yep, that's our guy. That's our guy getting drafted. Remember when Aaron Murray went to the Chiefs and you didn't think he was going to hang on very long, but you always kept an eye on him. And you're always like, that's our guy. I think obviously we're all going to follow Fromm and hope he does well. But it doesn't feel like, you know what, in 15 years, Jake Fromm will be a beloved figure here, but he won't be Buck Blue. He won't be, he won't be he won't be even McElroy at Alabama. Like the kind of figures that finished it off and were beloved forever. He will, and he's going to have a pro career where probably he's going to be maybe he surprises me in the Patriots. He turns into Tom Brady, game manager of the Patriots. That seems unlikely. Scouts certainly don't think that's going to happen, but maybe that does happen. But it still feels weird to think that he's just in the system. Now he's just another piece of meat for the NFL that they're just going to chew up and spit out, just like they did with Murray and all these other figures that were deeply, closely connected and beloved by Georgia football fans. To see that happening now and to feel like it is there's something unfinished about it, it's disorienting. It's disappointing, and I understand it. And clearly the fact that there may be no college football season this year, he clearly made the right choice. But it feels strange to think, oh yeah, Jake Fromm is going to get drafted in the next couple of days. I don't feel emotionally invested in it the way that this player that we've watched for the last 3 years has been so pivotal to everything that Georgia football did. It just feels incomplete.
Yeah, I think the weird part about it, and maybe it's not the weird part about it, I think all fans are this way, but UGA fans are very much this way. I think we'll see there will come a time down the road where, let's say we do have a season and Jamie Newman wins a national championship, or Brock Vandagriff comes in and wins one, or Carson Beck wins one, or DeJuan Mathis wins one, or Stetson Bennett wins one, whomever. There will always kind of be that kind of like a wink and a nod. He wasn't the one that quite couldn't get it done. Yeah. He was the one that quite couldn't get it done. And that is that's a shame, because I think you're exactly right. And kind of you started your screed with the concept of the rise of Georgia coincides with the rise of Fromm. And, I remember very vividly sitting in the stadium after Easton went down thinking wow, this season went downhill in a hurry. Mm-hmm. We got to go to Notre Dame next week. Are you kidding me? And then we win there, and I'm like, man, these guys could win the whole thing. I mean, it's just changed that fast because, we've used the term moxie with Jake Fromm. Everyone's used the term with moxie. He hasn't. And if he does catch on the league and he does become a game manager, a buddy of mine that's a huge Raiders fan asked me what I thought about him. I was like, well, I said, his mid-range is Andy Dalton. His super high range is Brady. And honestly, couldn't tell you where he goes. He's got to fix some footwork. He's got to learn it's okay to make mistakes sometimes and just let it go. But as far as somebody that's going to win the locker room and somebody's got a head on his shoulders, somebody's going to learn the playbook and be able to get people in the right place at the right time, and he's Peyton Manning in that way. But there will be some revisionist history, especially if Georgia wins the national championship in the next couple of seasons. That
it is.
Yeah, I agree.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it any better, and I won't try to say anything else because I think y'all both covered it completely. And you know what? I hadn't even been thinking about that until you brought it up. Now, that's kind of top of mind, so I'm going to be looking and kind of thinking that way. So thanks, Will. In a good way, and I mean that. Yeah. I mean that because
I get
I think
it.
Yeah.
I am now curious what happens to Jake Fromm in the NFL as opposed to deeply invested into what happens to Jake Fromm in the NFL. And that's not his fault. He don't owe me nothing. That's fine. You do whatever you want to yourself. But someday it's going to be 20 years from now, and if Georgia's won the national championship, it's going to be he's not going to be the one that did it. And so the person that is running that has the car dealership and is running and is brought out to get everybody fired up before at every homecoming, it's not going to be him. And I think that's a shame considering what he all did.
It'd be like if Tony just left this podcast early for another one, Still.
I think it's all. I think they've stopped all of that now. Yes, I think that even. I think that now it is. That's my last thing on this, and because I know we all got to go. I do think it's funny that that the NFL general managers are all like, how can we possibly do the deep chemistry and scientific, complicated mix of the NFL draft from our homes? No, how can, come on, dude, I hope this makes all the NFL drafts in the future all happen online, because again, may I remind you, it is just people reading names off a list. That's all that it is. I'm still going to watch it, but that's all that it is.
You got a point. It was good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good job, Tony.
Well, be safe, everyone. Be safe. I'm not hectoring anyone. Look at me this week. I'm not hectoring anyone. Everyone's great. I love you all, and I miss you all, and I will never, ever, ever complain about anything involving Georgia football until football starts, and then I will completely complain about things all the time. All right, everyone. Be safe, everybody. We'll talk soon, and hey, go Dawgs.
Good job, gentlemen.
All right, we got in under an hour. Look at that. We're amazing.
And thanks so much for listening. And for those of you who viewed the entire podcast episode on YouTube, appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed to our show, we're putting up more and more content. I hope to have up a special G-Day, look back for sometime on Saturday. So just go ahead and subscribe to WSLS Podcast on YouTube. And of course, you can always find us on social media at WSLS Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, even Facebook. We don't really do Facebook that much, but we have an account, so you can follow us there. But we hope to see y'all on campus sometime very soon, hopefully this fall. I guess a full schedule, 12 games. We really want to look forward to 12 games, but we'll see what happens. But until then, enjoy your weekend, stay safe, and as always, go Dawgs.